Welcome to the BuyBox Experts podcast. We bring to light the unique opportunities brands face in today's e-commerce world.
Hi, I'm James Thompson, one of the hosts of the BuyBox Experts podcast. I'm a partner with BuyBox Experts and the former business head of the Selling on Amazon team at Amazon, as well as the first account manager for the Fulfillment by Amazon program. I'm the co-author of the book, Controlling Your Brand in the Age of Amazon, and co-founder of The Prosper Show, one of the largest continuing education conferences for Amazon sellers in North America. Today's episode is brought to you by BuyBox Experts. BuyBox Experts takes ambitious brands and makes them unbeatable. When you hire BuyBox Experts, you receive the strategy optimization and marketing performance to succeed on Amazon. Go to buyboxexperts.com to learn more. Our guest today is Damon Burton. He is an international search marketing expert. Over a decade ago, he first beat a billion-dollar company by outranking its website on Google. Since then, he knew he was onto something and has gone on to build an international search engine marketing company that's worked with NBA teams as well as Inc. 5000 and Shark Tank featured businesses. Since founding his company SEO National in 2007, he writes for Forbes, has been featured in publications including Entrepreneur Magazine, BuzzFeed, and US Weekly. Damon has recently written a book on search engine optimization titled Outrank. In the new book, Outrank, Damon serves up a guide for those who want to dominate Google's search engine without paying for ads. In full disclosure to our audience, I've worked with Damon and his firm on multiple online properties that we have owned. Very impressed with his skills. I'm excited to share Damon with our audience today. So welcome, Damon, and thank you for joining us today on the BuyBox Experts podcast.
Yeah, thanks, James. Looking forward to chatting.
Damon, in your book, you talk about this concept of being a hunter versus a fisherman. Can you explain what this means in the context of SEO building efforts?
Yeah, so you think of hunter versus fisherman, and one is always on the move. The hunter always having to chase the leads, always having to chase the sales. And then there's the fisherman where you kind of establish a process and then your leads come to you. So it's interesting, a lot of what you do, I often think of you and your partner, Joe, we do things parallel. So you are to Amazon in attracting sales as kind of I am in the Google world. And so, there's all these opportunities now with paid ads, and there's nothing wrong with paid ads. But I think a lot of times people get caught up in like, what's the latest, shiniest object? And so whether that's ClickFunnels or paid Facebook ads. And if those drive a return, that's fine, do those. But I think the distraction of those newer shiny objects kind of detracts from the long-term things that have always been there. Probably to kind of tie up this answer is relative to today, everybody's, talking about the virus and how it's impacting business. And what about those businesses that have historically driven sales by paid ads? What are you going to do now when you have to tighten your budget? Then you're going to have to decrease your leads. So organic search engine marketing without using paid ads is always like a really good safety net. You can still do those other things, or it can be the core of your sales. But as the fisherman, your leads and your sales come to you without always having to set the bait and pay the ads.
That being said, if I extend this anecdote a little bit further, being a fisherman requires more patience and requires you to be prepared to have to wait longer for the fish to start finding you and coming to you. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about, when I work with companies that are saying, oh, yeah, we need an SEO strategy. One of the first things that's pretty obvious by the way they talk about SEO is this concept that somehow there's a lever that we go over, we flip it on, and now it's running fully functionally. And, isn't that great?
Yeah.
How do you help companies understand, hey, listen, you're hiring me, and by the way, it's going to take a long time for this to fully bake and for you to realize all those fish that you're pulling out of the water. How do you help people think about this as being a long-term investment versus something that they can turn on and off just like a short-term advertising budget?
Yeah, you had mentioned that I wrote a book, and I think on page 1 in the book it says, the key to success. I know we're only on page 1 of the book, but here I'm going to give you the answer right now. And what you need to be successful is patience. And so you're exactly right. The reason why it takes time, and to answer your question directly, how I establish and communicate this to clients is I kind of give them examples, because SEO and search engine marketing, a lot of times, some of the other guys, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And so it's like, well, we're going to do these proprietary things and blah, blah, blah. And they don't actually tell you what they're going to do. So I really make a strong effort to set expectations and communicate what we are going to do. So I don't just say this takes time. What I do is I say this takes time and here's why. And so some of those examples are, you're basically building a reputation and a relationship built on trust with Google. So Google they want to look good, right? They don't want to send people to a website that has an irrelevant answer or is a bad user experience. And so to accommodate those things, you have to build good content, which means you have to do a lot of research. And you have to do good copywriting. And then likewise, they don't want to send people to a slow website or one that's not user-friendly. So you have to build those things to have a good website, a mobile-friendly website. And just the logistics behind checking each of those things off of the list, it just takes time. And so that's why, I don't think you have to muddy the waters in explaining why it takes time. I think a lot of these other guys kind of dodge the question and they just want the long-term contract. But if you help the client, if you educate them, you better help them to be able to help you drive better results.
So tell me a little bit more about your firm, SEO National. There are thousands of SEO firms out there. So how should brands be thinking about finding the right agency that meets their needs for SEO?
Well, it's largely what you kind of touched on in the question before is, are they promising speed, like instant gratification? Like you can't rank quickly on Google just because of the logistics we talk about. So the things you want to look out for are the ones that offer guarantees. Obviously, I'd love to guarantee, but it's just not realistic. And so what you do instead is set realistic expectations. So look for the agency that communicates clearly and transparently, sets expectations, and is willing to educate you through the process. If they offer guarantees, if they offer instant results, or, one of my favorites is if they say what we do is proprietary, then just run. Because at the end of the day, we're all doing generally the same concepts, just some of us are doing it more efficiently.
Yes. So you've worked with countless brands to create rich SEO assets that have helped the brands to do much better than their weight class. Can you talk about some of the ways that smaller or startup brands can outwit and outplay bigger, more established brands?
Yeah, there's some easy free tools that the listeners can go hit up. Some examples are Answer the Public and spyfu.com. Now I'll kind of elaborate on why those are valuable for smaller brands. Let's start with SpyFu. That's a great tool because you can, I like to say, follow the money. So if you're a smaller brand and you're trying to identify what your competitors are monetizing, SpyFu will tell you, if they have enough data and your competitors are large enough, if they have enough results showing up on the radar, it's going to tell you what keywords they're targeting organically, what keywords they're throwing money at. So follow that money, because if they're willing to spend a budget on it, then it's probably driving a return, which if you're in direct competition with them, it's probably a good candidate to drive a return for you too. So go to SpyFu and look up kind of what your market is doing, your industry. Then take that and go to answerthepublic.com. Now what's cool
Answerthepublic.com? Okay.
So what's cool about Answer the Public is, James, when you go to Google and you start typing out, I want to know about XYZ, and then Google starts to fill it out for you. Well, what that's doing is Google's saying, historically, people that start to type that question want one of these 5 things. And so what that is that's exactly your audience. So go start to type in words related to your industry or words that were revealed in SpyFu. And then you don't have to guess about what content to write. And then you don't have to guess about what blog posts to create or what, infographics to make or what, what questions that you can answer for your audience, because that is exactly what your audience is asking. So Answer the Public will go pull that data down and give you this really cool chart that says the who, what, when, where, and why about your industry. And that is your audience right there. So tap into those questions they're already asking, and then you become the authority by answering those.
So I'm a new brand. I'm getting started with SEO. I've got a bunch of money to throw at advertising / SEO. Take me through what realistically are the trade-offs that one can make around spending more for SEO versus simply having to wait and build that kind of asset over time? Is there a way to accelerate much faster your SEO presence if you're willing to throw money at the situation?
Not necessarily. I mean, there's a couple things that you can do, in larger quantities, but maybe an easy way to answer this question is when we have a new lead, I don't offer pricing tiers and packages because
Mm-hmm.
the problems that I see with that are that if we had a sales team, I don't want a commission person, presenting the larger priced package
Yeah.
so they can make more money.
Yeah.
Likewise, I don't want the client choosing the cheaper package. Understandably, I get why sometimes that sounds appealing, but then I don't want to be fulfilling on a package that I know isn't going to drive the results. So when we come in and what we do is we basically look at three things. We say, okay, what is their market? Is it hyper competitive, or are they selling a little niche widget? The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is there geographical limitations? Do they service only a city versus a state versus national versus international?
Yep.
So the broader you go, obviously, the more competition, the more assets you got to create. And then kind of the last thing that we usually look at is what backend does their website run on? Is it on a search engine friendly platform like WordPress or Shopify, or is it some archaic backend, or it's static and we have to manually touch hundreds of pages?
Yes.
So depending on those things, we come in and we say, okay, you are in this very specific scenario, which needs these very specific areas of fulfillment, and that equates to this time and this cost. And so we give very specific rates based on, exactly what you need. So therefore, no, you don't really throw more money at it. Maybe you can write more content, as long as it's value added, but no, you don't just mass produce content just to mass produce it. So usually there's a very strategic strategy that's needed, and then
Mm-hmm.
a given time frame for it to roll out.
So we've had clients at Buybox Experts that have built a lot of content assets where they managed to get a lot of backlinks or other websites to review their products. How do you think about the process of building backlinks? All at once, one at a time, prioritizing some sites over other? Is there guidance you can share with brands that are looking to develop backlinks? And I raise this whole question about backlinks because, for somebody like myself who's not very well versed in SEO, I hear about backlinks all the time. Got to get the backlinks.
Mm-hmm.
Got to get the backlinks. So talk me through what a strategy would be if somebody is interested in using backlinks. Is it even an effective strategy for SEO?
Yeah, so for the listeners that might not be familiar, what a backlink is when another website links to yours. When Google came into the search engine world, that was the main factor that differentiated them from Yahoo and Lycos and
Mm-hmm.
all those other ones. Is historically those other search engines would use meta keywords, which are no longer used at all by Google as of at least 2009. And so Google said, well, what if we look at these external things? And so it's like a popularity contest. If we have these votes coming inbound via links, then that probably means something. They're more popular, and so they're more credible. So backlinks is still a valuable concept, but it's much more a quality play than quantity.
Okay.
And as of 2012, there was an algorithm that Google rolled out called Penguin. Before that, you could scale backlinks using automated software, and it was just, it was like the wild, wild west. Like just the more you did, regardless of
Yep.
quality, usually the better. Then after that algorithm, it was like instantly changed to quantity. And so for that reason, you may have been, if you've been in SEO long enough, you may have had a client or for yourself done 1,000 backlinks a month back then. Now you're lucky if you spend the same amount of time, zero automation, entirely manual outreach and other ways, and lucky if you get 10. And so
Yes.
quality is way more important than quantity. And the other thing that's really important for listeners is relevancy. So try and connect with websites that are related to your industry. It's much more effective to have 10 links from a relevant website than 100 links from, even if it's an okay website, but if it's completely unrelated to your industry, chances are the 10 are going to be better than the 100.
So use the term Wild Wild West. Talk to us for a few minutes about what aspects of SEO are still very much Wild Wild West versus aspects of Google SEO that are very well established, very clear ground rules. Are there still aspects where people run around and do crazy stuff and things haven't been particularly well locked down by Google?
There's certainly a lot of people that I guess you'd say experiment, but
Hmm.
and there are corner cutters that may get
Yep.
some
Yep.
short-term wins, but
Yep.
eventually the algorithms catch on. All you have to do is establish a footprint of doing, shady tactics, and then it's pretty quick that Google's going to come around. So yeah, you may be able to get away with some things, but it's a pretty short run, and then the long-term penalties as a result of that are usually not worth it.
Yep. Yep. So we've talked about Google SEO. Things on Amazon in the world of SEO are a little bit different.
Hmm.
When I think about on Amazon, it's important for brands to incorporate videos into their product listings. How do you think about video content in the world of Google SEO? Are there certain types of videos that make sense for product brands? And where should those brands be primarily used?
So there's a couple of potential benefits to video. Yeah, the it's kind of the same answer where the value is in the uniqueness. So if you're just duplicating a video that's already out there, you're not going to get a lot of value. So what I would recommend is if you can do a video that brings unique value, or if it's a product, showcase the value propositions of your
Hmm.
product.
Hmm.
So here's how I would load it. A lot of times people say, well, do I load it directly to my website or do I load it to YouTube? Now there's advantages and disadvantages, so I'll communicate what those are, and then
Okay.
I'll tell you how to do the middle ground. So the advantages to loading a website directly to your website are that's your asset. So then Google sees it directly on your website. Now the disadvantages usually you have, because you're loading the raw file, then it loads slower. It may not be as mobile friendly or cross device friendly. So then that leads to the advantages of YouTube. You load it to YouTube and then it's universal friendly. They figure out how to display it based on whatever the device and browser is.
Yep.
But the downside is that now that's on YouTube. And so it's not directly on your website. So what you can do is you can create what's called an XML sitemap. Now, some people will be familiar with XML sitemaps in the form of content. And what a sitemap is when a search engine comes to your website, it basically says, okay, I'm going to follow the links and follow the content. And then I go, oh, I found this other page. And then here's another page. Instead, a sitemap says, hey, Google, instead of, fumbling around trying to identify the content, I'm just going to give you the blueprint that shows exactly where all my content is.
Okay.
Now, if you have a video sitemap, it's the same thing. And so there's a really easy way. A lot of people probably have WordPress websites, and so I'll give you an easy way for a WordPress website. You can search a plugin called Google XML Video Sitemaps. Now, what that does is allows you to load the video to YouTube, so you get the quick load, the cross-device, mobile-friendly, efficiency.
Hmm.
But then this plugin says anytime you embed a YouTube video on your website, it says, oh, okay, well, now we're going to create a sitemap, and then we're going to ping Google, and we're going to tell it that the video is on this page, but it comes from this YouTube link. And then you kind of get the best of both worlds, because it's kind of saying, here's the video on YouTube, but give us the credit associated
Yes.
with this
Yes.
content on my website.
When I think about myself and being exposed to all these different forms of social media, there seem to be new social media platforms popping up every year, and quite frankly, I don't know what they all do.
Hmm.
So if I'm a brand and I'm being presented with the opportunity to put my message on all these different platforms, how do you help brands make sense of, okay, there's this social media platform and this one and this one and this one and this one does this and this one does this? How do you build a comprehensive strategy that says, for the types of products or services you offer, we would suggest that you participate here and here, but not over here? My general sense here is it's hard to be in all these places all at once. And so how does a company make sense of all these social platforms and figure out whether their product or service makes sense to the audiences on those platforms?
Well, the first thing to differentiate is that social media has very little influence on SEO, and
Okay.
a lot of people are surprised to realize that. And the argument is that, well, I can have a lot of likes and a lot of comments, but here's the easy answer to why it doesn't matter. So Facebook.com is one domain.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if you have a bazillion likes, it's still one domain. On the SEO side, the value is based on the diversity and, like we said earlier, the relevance of a variety of domains. So there's very little overlap, but excluding the SEO answer and just focusing on the social media answer, that's not to say social media doesn't have value in itself. Obviously it does. But it's like, kind of the old general rule is don't become don't work on multiple things and then end up being mediocre at all of them.
Yes.
So an example for me is my audience is largely on LinkedIn. It is not on Instagram. And so I spend more time on LinkedIn. So identify where your audience is. If you're a restaurant owner, then it's probably the opposite. You probably have less audience on LinkedIn, but you can show these beautiful plates of your amazing dishes on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So first identify where your audience is. Then I would really commit to one platform at a time. Get really good at just one, because you can drive more leads and visibility on one than you can on diluting yourself across many. And you don't have to jump into the next thing immediately. We talked about kind of shiny object syndrome earlier. TikTok is huge right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've done 0 videos, and I plan on doing 0 in the future, because that's not my audience. And even if my audience was there, you also have to say, is that my style? Like, I don't want to get on and dance to music videos. Even if
come on, Damon, come on. So Damon, let me ask you about the COVID crisis. Have you seen any strong long-term SEO investments made by brands paying off in unexpected ways during this crisis?
Yeah, there's a couple ways we can answer that. The one is the obvious, that the clients aren't suffering because they haven't overly committed to a reliance on paid ads.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what you have to realize about COVID is that there are more people online than ever. I think during the first couple of weeks, examples of, Facebook and Google search queries were up like 50%, just something astronomical.
Yeah.
And so the SEO specific answer, one example is we have, a vendor that does food gift items. And so they have a physical retail shop, and they also have an online distribution of their product. And so everybody is needing the convenience of, you can't go sit in the majority of these restaurants, but you still want to go eat, or you still want your favorite dish.
Yep.
And so there's been a huge spike. I think there was just across the board in every industry, like that first week or two, everyone kind of was like, what do we do next? And there was just a pause. And then after that, just so much, there was a huge spike in online demand, because people said, okay, even though things aren't normal, we have to still live, and we still have to do things and buy things and consume things. So yeah, there's been a huge increase, because online is largely the only option for a lot of people. So if you had a head start and we're already at the top of visibility, then you're just instantaneously reaping those rewards.
So good to have been investing in SEO for a while to get to a place where people will still find you, even when the way that people search may be changing significantly. That's really good advice. Let me ask you, shift gears a little bit, Damon. Talk to me about big turning points that you had early days professionally working with brands. When did you realize that you were good at doing what you do, helping brands with their SEO performance?
There's been a couple fun moments in the timeline of this. Probably the first one was in year 1 of the company. When I originally started the company, it was largely a design agency.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a client come to us and say, well, what do you know about Google? And we said, well, we know enough that we'd be willing to experiment, but I didn't feel comfortable saying, well, I'm not going to charge you. I'm going to charge you for it, because I knew I wasn't the expert at it in that time. And so what we did is we said, let's set a benchmark where that way I'm still incentivized. If I hit it, then you owe retroactively. But if not, then you're at no risk. And so we set, I think it was like a 3-month goal, and we hit it in about less than 6 weeks. And so then I said, okay, that was fun. Let's apply this to a second client. And we did the same thing, hit the same goal really quickly. And so it was very definitively at that moment, I said, SEO is going to be my thing, because as we said earlier, I too don't want to be the agency that says we do it all and then is mediocre at all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point we said, all right, we're going to shift gears. We still do a lot of design, but we don't advertise it. The design is for the benefit of our SEO clients. And so at that point we said, all right, we're going to shift our model to an SEO agency. And then as we evolved, we've been really fortunate to never spend $1 on advertising. So here we are 13 years later and grown into this big agency just on referrals. And so that has gone far to speak to the results that we drive, because you bring value to one company and then they welcome you into their inner circle of other successful agencies and companies. So there's been a lot of moments like that where we've had big home runs. We worked with the Utah Jazz's retail division recently on increasing their sales for jerseys and hats and merchandise. And so things like that are really exciting to add to the resume, to work with, not only respectable names, but me being in Utah, just kind of like rooting for the home team.
So I want to ask you one final question for our discussion today. Talk to me a little bit about your mentors and the kinds of advice they've given you for learning to be good to yourself and being good to the world. You certainly have done more than your typical business person when it comes to thinking about things beyond just getting work done. I have a pretty strong suspicion you've got some mentors that have been helping you through that. To take us through that, and even if you don't want to talk about the specific mentors, I'd love to hear the advice and how you learn to incorporate that into the way that you operate.
You'll be surprised by the answer. I don't have any mentors. In fact, I've learned that's not to say that I haven't learned a lot from other people, but I've learned in the opposite way. And what I mean is I've learned how to treat people, with respect by seeing, former employers not be respectful to agencies or to their employees. So, one of the last gentlemen I worked for before I started my company, super successful. He was doing probably $2 to $3 million a month, and I was his only full-time employee. And here I was making $12.50 an hour. And it wasn't the pay that was a problem, because at the time I was in my early 20s, and that was just fine for me. But it was the way that he treated his team. And then as the company grew and he brought on other people, he would offer incentives and then not pay them. Or he would offer, we'd go to Christmas parties and then he'd bail on us. Like just these really bizarre relationships. And so I really learned how to identify and appreciate the small things as an employee. And so now I apply those to my team. Another good example is one time I was at dinner, and it was after hours on a weekend or something, like a Friday night. And he was calling and calling and calling. And I was at dinner with my wife at like 7:30 at night. And then when I didn't answer, it was emails and text messages. And so at that moment, I deleted email from my phone, and I've never had email on my phone since then. And so there's other things like that, but seeing the mistakes that other companies make or the mistakes that managers make. And I really try to look for the proactive ways to, care more for the people that support me and support them in return.
Damon, I want to thank you for joining us today. Before we leave, can you share a few words on where people can go to learn more about you and your services?
Yeah, thanks for the time, James. I spent the last 2 years, I just wrote this book, Outrank, and it just hit Amazon, but I'm giving away some free copies for the next couple of weeks. If you want to go to freeseobook.com, there'll be a download on there.
Great. Damon, thanks again, and good luck with the book. Good luck with the agency. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the BuyBox Experts podcast. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web, and we'll see you next time.